Welcome to yet another episode of the Family Pictures Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going away. I don't know if you realize that. You better start listening because we're not going anywhere.
No, this is episode 38.
And actually, you'll get a kick out of this, Michael. Mikhail Gershovich, who's a mutual friend of ours. Mikhail, big shout out to you.
What up, Mikhail? I miss you. Love you.
So he basically says to me, he's like, how the hell did you two almost already record 40 episodes? He's like, what kind of regimen are you on? I'm like, Michael is for real, man. He's just like, every week we go. Like, I feel like I'm making a TV show or something.
I'm on the juice, Jim. I'm on the juice.
You are juicing. So we've actually been having a lot of fun with these themed movies. And we've been doing like theme movies in like blocks of 5. We did the summer 70s films, hot summer 70s films with horror, which was great. And then we did before that 80s high school films. And then recently we did 90s indie films. Yep. And we're making a transition and we're kind of keeping the indie spirit, but we're talking about a theme that we kind of came up with. And it's inspired actually by a film that's out in the theaters right now, One Battle After Another. And the theme is families on the run. So we're going to get into another 5 or 6 film kind of jaunt here where we'll be talking about families on the run and looking at, different ways Hollywood deals with, families under duress, on the run, and what that means for some of our
outside of society too, right? That's what I like about this idea. These are typically families that are not your typical nuclear family that deals with typical stresses. This is not supposed to be how you raise your family typically.
Yeah. And, some of the families, one from the 80s, I'll hint at it. There's a family of hippies where, things went wrong in the 60s and now they're wanted by the FBI, right? Like, so things go different. And I think it brings up some interesting and fun concepts to look at. And I like the idea of a family under stress. Like you said, it kind of gets us away from the typical nuclear family that has its small stresses, but in the end, everything's fine. For example, a lot of those 80s teen films, right?
Yeah.
There's not much stress other than like, can you get her underwear or not? So that's the biggest stress. So, and so anyway, today's film, Hanna, I think it came out in 2011. And what do you know about this film, Mike?
So Hanna was my choice to punt on The Sound of Music.
Yeah, probably a good call.
Yeah, which I don't think is maybe going to make this list after all, because it's like the runaway plot is maybe a footnote at the end of the film, which is really a musical romance, I mean, I don't think I've literally ever sat through that entire 3-hour film. I would have and will for this podcast if you really want.
It's a great family movie.
No, it's it's a movie.
We don't have to do it on this run.
I can see doing musicals actually as a theme at some point, because I think that's actually a fun exploration. But anyway, so Hanna was like, "Hey, we're doing Families on the Run. Have you ever watched Hanna?" And Jim had never seen it, and so it's going to be interesting, his take. And it's a film that I, found through Amazon probably a number of years ago, and then subsequently watched the entire run of the TV series, which came out of it a few years later, almost, I think like 8 years later. Anyway, and I'll give some thoughts on that as well. And what's interesting about this film is it's kind of a film school kid's first script, right? So Seth Lockhead is, 20 years old, maybe 22, and he's attending the Vancouver Film School as an MFA, screenwriter, film student. And he's working on this screenplay and getting feedback from his instructors. And this great story talks about getting feedback after the film was premieres many years later. He's doing this lovely interview talk on stage back at the Vancouver Film School, what nice symmetry. It's like, this is where I started this script. And, 8 years later, I would love to tell you about my experience, which is a little fraught. So he talked about working with screenwriter Rick Drew, who became an instructor at the film school, and how much of a positive influence he was. And he was always just saying like, yes, more of that, even though he's trying to guide him through the storytelling process. And then he gets eaten up a bit by the Hollywood machine. His film gets picked up by Focus, and Focus just like rewrites the crap out of it. There's like, and there's another credited screenwriter in David Farr, and we'll talk about him because he actually is the one who shepherds the TV series many years later. And neither of them are big, huge Hollywood players by any stretch of the imagination to this day. And in the belly of the beast, he's feeling like it's all no, 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 no. And his characters are changed a bit. He talks a lot about how he actually appreciated Eric Bana's approach to the Eric Heller character, and how he softened his stern kind of withholding father and made him more humane in his relationship with his daughter. But at the same time, there's this whole like genetic engineering plot that was added to the film that he was like, can't we just let Hanna just be like a mythical beast, and it just like we don't know? And they're like, nah, we have to like create this Jason Bourne like plot behind it. Oh wait, you're muted. Something's up.
It's good to hear that. Thank you. It's good to hear that, because one of the things I thought of when I was watching this is like, what's up with this DNA add-on plot? Like, and it doesn't really, it's kind of out there somewhere, and it doesn't really kind of work entirely. So I could imagine him, and when you wrote your production notes, it kind of hit me like some of the challenges of this film for me probably were many of the challenges for the writer and the director for him to watch what had happened to his own film. So in that regard, it's super interesting.
Yeah. And it's a great simple story too, of a person who's like, wow, I sell my screenplay, it's picked up by Focus Features, and they're like, bye. And then suddenly he describes, in another interview, 6 years later, he gets a call out of the blue saying like, hey, we're beginning production in Germany. Do you want to come work on production rewrites? And it's interesting because they bring him back on because the script's a bit of a mess. And credit to the director, Joe Wright, Lockhead speaks really positively about him. It's like, oh, here's yet for the first time since I've been involved in the Hollywood machine, here's the first person who's starting to say yes again, right? Yes, give me ideas. Yes, let's solve these problems and make this work. And he talked a lot about like how he was brought on to kind of burnish the edges of this kind of skeletal, multi-pronged script that he didn't completely recognize. But he does say at the core of it, he believes in that the character of Hanna is truthful to what he had initially envisioned, and he credits Joe Wright in bringing him back. But it also sounds like in this experience of being in Berlin and working on this script, he thought it'd be a couple weeks, and it turns into like 3.5 months. And he doesn't have his girlfriend Casey, who is the person he trusted the most to give feedback, and he kind of goes nuts. And he's writing pages and pages days before shooting, and he's just trying to talk his way and email his way to explain what it all means. And he's so uncomfortable. And it's kind of remarkable. I found his kind of story about his process very endearing and interesting in the context of this film.
It's interesting too, because this film, you talk about the Bourne identity piece, and I definitely that's definitely there.
Yeah.
But there's like a whole slew of these movies that come out, right? There's Red Sparrow with Jennifer Lawrence, which is very similar. It's like Trained Assassin. And then you obviously have the Marvel figure from the Avengers, Black Widow, whose character is very similar, right? And so there is like a whole subgenre of these like female assassin movies that come out, and Hanna seems to be, front and center in that genre. And more than thinking about Born Identity, which makes sense for action. You know what I think about when I see this film? I think about Stephen King's Firestarter.
Oh, really?
And I think about Carrie. So like these kind of young girls who are going through these transitions, and the one Firestarter in particular stars Drew Barrymore.
Yeah.
And she's basically taken in for, government experiments. Sound familiar? And, she obviously, her parents are, and then she's a kind of byproduct of that. And so she becomes this kind of, superpowered, superhuman figure, and then they're hunting her down.
Right.
And so I was like, wow, they took that whole horror kind of Firestarter / Carrie vision, and they turned it into a Born Identity, action movie. But she's very much, for me, a Drew Barrymore like figure, even in like the way, I mean, she's amazing the way she looks, though her acting is great. And the way in which she fits that role, for me, is probably the most compelling piece of the movie.
Yeah, for me, it's more actually the Luc Besson French La Femme Nikita, right? Like that's how I see Hanna.
That's a good one.
Where instead of the woods in Raised Feral in the woods, the Anne Perlade, I'm probably mangling her last name, her French last name, character is she's feral from the streets of Paris, right? The underbelly of Paris. And even I think, it's so funny because the director, Joe Wright, tries to say he's inspired by, oh gosh, another director, and it doesn't matter for those, but it's really Luc Besson. Like the pacing of this film, and it has this very Euro French kind of like shtick, even with the Chemical Brothers soundtrack, which La Femme Nikita has this very industrial soundtrack as well, which I think is much, much more accomplished. I mean, it's one of my favorite action films of all time is La Femme Nikita. And so, but anyway, like the idea of like Hanna being this outside character and born of the wild rather than chemically induced, by the CIA, I personally also find much more compelling. And, there's a lot where, Lockhead talks about this was meant to be a fairy tale, and, it's inspired by Grimm's fairy tales. And there's all this visualization that plays with fairy tales, especially in the final scenes in the park that are like, that have all of the wolf sculptures and, and the dinosaurs that are broken and stuff like that. But, I mean, we should set the framework here of who our characters are as we transition to the story. So we have Saoirse Ronan, who's 16 or 17, playing Hanna. And Saoirse becomes like kind of a pretty, well-respected actor moving forward. And, she ends up doing a lot of great work, and Lady Bird might be a family picture we'll do. I get a sense that would be a good one to do as well at some point. That's an indie film that's not from the 90s, and maybe we'll have a new generation of indie films we get to do at some point, and that'd be great. 21st century indie films. And then we have Eric Bana playing the Eric Heller character. And then finally, we have out of nowhere, you would never expect Cate Blanchett.
Yeah, I was like, Cate Blanchett's in this? She's in everything.
I know, and she's like
a break. She's like Tom Hanks.
Yeah, in like multiple Academy Awards, right? And the funny thing is, Lockhead tells a story about how when writing the Marissa Beigler character, who's like kind of this literal spook who's trying to capture and Eric and Hanna, he had her in mind, and he never would reveal this to her. He couldn't believe she got cast, and when he met her, it's like he was trying to not fangirl with her and just was like trying to play it cool. And it's like, I would have loved to hear the story that's like, I'd always like pictured you in this role when I was writing it. He was way too freaked out to do something like that.
So let me ask you a question. So we have, Saoirse, and she's
Saoirse. I looked it up.
Saoirse.
Yeah.
Saoirse. Is that good?
Yeah, you're good.
Not Saoirse.
Not Saoirse.
So we have Saoirse, and she's another figure who reminds me of Stranger Things.
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, that whole, I don't know why the king thing hit so hard for me, because even though it's an add-on with the DNA stuff, that
Yeah.
connects it to all of that, even though he may have wanted to be, like you said, fairy tale, and this is just this is just how she is, right?
Yeah.
Just kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
some superhuman
Yeah.
figure, or who's been trained really well. But
Right. Right.
anyway, go on.
No, she's more of the experiment in the Millie Bobby Brown character, 11 from
Yeah,
Stranger Things,
exactly.
but that's very American. They want there to be these neat science fiction explanations for things rather than the more fantastical or even just unexplainable, right? The unexplained.
But is
Well,
this an American film or is this a European film?
it's definitely an American film in terms of producers. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a Canadian script. It's
Yep.
shot in Europe, but it's very much an American film ultimately.
Yeah, it feels that way for sure.
Yeah. And even though, like I said, it feels like a Luke Besson like kind of directed film by Joe Wright. But so we are introduced to our first family here, which is Eric and Hanna living alone in the woods when Hanna is off on a hunt. So let's start to delve into what's the father-daughter relationship like in this film.
What's the father-daughter? Like, adapt or die, adapt or die, adapt or die.
You're dead right now. I've killed you.
I have killed you. You could have broken my neck. Why didn't you, young, beautiful daughter?
It's
with
like
my accent that I don't know what it is. I'm an American agent, but now I have an accent.
From Finland, yes. But technically he's not American. He's like a CIA agent. He's like basically he's not an expat.
He's Eric Bana. It's
Yeah,
good to know though that Eric Bana has kept himself in good shape. That I'm happy about.
Yeah. And I love his tough love. It's like, well, because of your failures of not recognizing I was going to kill you. It's like, you dragged that deer home yourself. It's like, that's you.
Exactly. And the other thing, I mean, Eric Bana is probably as wooden as an actor can get. Like, he has no depth to him at all. And like, remember when he did the Hulk? Like, how can you mess up Ang Lee's Hulk? And Eric Bana was like, I'm going to get mad. You shouldn't do this. I was like, what? And unfortunately, Eric Bana, you have this unbelievable young actress who's ripping up the screen. Then you have Eric Bana, who's just kind of like, remember me from Troy? You don't remember me from Hulk? I'm still around.
I wonder how many parts like Eric Bana went up for against Christian Bale, and he's like, "Fuck, Christian Bale's gonna kick my ass again," because you really feel like those two were trying to be on parallel tracks, and Christian Bale's like just range is way more dynamic in the emotional weight he can bring to a moment. But I mean, again, like Lockhead, at least he talked about like it was an intentional quietness he played it with, because he wrote him as a much more gruff character. So, but the fun thing is like he's this person who's helping to design his daughter into a super soldier, right? Like, so it's all day, every day is endless physical drilling and combat training with the sticks. It's like musical, right? And like how they're playing this like ballet of sticks and all this, I love the endless, also, she's also conversant in a dozen different languages, but she only has like a book smart understanding of the world, and these descriptions are kind of they're basically comical descriptions of her connection. And my favorite one, I was talking with Jim right before we started this, is they're doing their kind of routine. It's like a bedtime story, and he's reading through Wikipedia basically, or like an encyclopedia, an actual physical encyclopedia. And he's telling the story of the dog, the cosmonaut Laika, who was sent up to space by the Soviets in one of their earlier, orbit experiments with a rocket. And it's like he's celebrating that dog's sacrifice, and she's just like, can't you just read it differently? I want the dog to live. Basically, it's like, but
Like
this
a
isn't
list.
important. This is part of these indicators of her wanting like more than like this, like you must like live to survive and to change and blah 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 blah. It's like, no, I want some romance. I'm a teenager, man.
Exactly. I want to live. Right?
Yeah,
I don't want to just kill, elk or a caribou or
or
whatever
a
that
deer,
reindeer.
whatever it was. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And then, obviously miss the heart. And, there is that beginning where, she shoots an arrow, hits the reindeer, brings it down, and then goes up to it and then is like, you know, I missed your heart. And then as kind of some kind of penance, shoots the reindeer. And then it's like, Hanna, right?
yeah,
So like, it's like red and white, Hanna. And like obviously that's a bookend of this movie. But it's like it wasn't clear to me whether that was a mercy kill or whether it was just like how brutal she is. And that's one of the things this movie and Hanna can never really balance is like, is she really just a nut? Or is there like some balance, in her trying to understand her power and be merciful with it? And
right.
even to the very end, that's not clear, which is one of the things I
No.
think might be really interesting if there's a series made out of it.
Well, that's where the series has 3 seasons to explore this, and I'll talk a lot about that because there is when you're given the room to explore characters, and the English family is explored a lot in this series in ways that it can't be, but the glimpses of it are introduced in the film, and there's glimpses of these conflicts are explored in the film as well. Like this conflict, is Hannah simply a killing machine, or is she capable of, escaping her feral upbringing and becoming a real girl and finding connection to family and friends and learn how to do that in the real world? Because and that's the thing. It's like, she talks about like there's this she says to her father during bedtime story time, what does music feel like? And he like turns to the encyclopedia entry of music. It's music, a synchronized like set of notes presented him. And he's like, no, I want to feel it myself. It's like he's like doing the classic like holding back their child and not letting them explore and be an adolescent and be alone. But he does finally recognize like he has to relent, and you get a sense that for the first time, and that's what this image of in the background is. He says, do you want to come hunt with me? And she's like, wait, what? I can choose, I cannot go. And it's like he's like, basically, yeah, if you want to. And she's like, oh no, I'll stay alone. And this becomes the pivotal moment where she makes the choice to flip the switch, and that brings Marissa Viegler coming to hunt them.
Yeah, it's interesting that whole switch. Like, you go from childhood to adulthood with
Yeah.
just a switch. And
Yeah.
one of the things,
beep, 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 beep.
and one of the things to get there before, he brings out the switch and says, you're ready, is he attacked his daughter while she's sleeping at night, which is such a great scene where it's like she's sleeping and, he comes after her trying to kill her because they're not playing around, father and daughter, but they're not
Right.
play fighting. And she kicks his ass. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
he's like, you're ready.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
that.
and it's like you must always be ready, even in your sleep. She's like,
Even in your
oh,
sleep.
God, let me just like take a nap, Dad. God. And and so this brings out like, the MacGuffin is this like switch that beeps, like, oh, it's adulthood time, which is kind of funny as a manifestation of like, if children actually had a switch that flipped them, and it's almost like that happens. Like if I think about my own kids and how suddenly they go from the kids that run to you as you enter the door when they're little, like daddy's home, yay, to like never being around. And then and at the same time they're starting to say things or act ways that you're just like, whoa, you now have adult thoughts. But in this world, it's literally her choice to become an adult. And then because the setup of the film in a sense from Eric's point of view is like, I'm preparing you so that you can kill Marissa Viegler. And we don't know why. And he doesn't even explain to her why. He says, like,
No.
as soon as you go into the real world, this woman is going to be pursuing you and I until we're dead or she's dead. And you're like, we're all just like, as an audience, like, okay. And so she allows herself, and I guess it's part of the plan. He goes off towards Berlin, and you go get captured and try to kill Marissa, and then we'll meet back up in Berlin. And she
Does he
has to
swim to Berlin?
from Finland. Yes, that's what I've done. With his suit, he walks out in a suit.
Yeah, and then he has this weird kind of like gossamer like bathing suit, like almost not bathing suit. It's almost like long johns.
Yeah. It's
and
like,
he gets out of the water, kills two people
Yeah.
convenient or
Yeah.
casually, and
Yep.
then puts on a suit.
Yeah. There's some okay, I'll start giving you clues as the TV series. So, in the TV series, this is expressed a little more cleanly in that Joel, I think his name is Joel Kinnaman. I'm going to look him up. Hanna TV series. Here it is. And it's played. Yeah, I was right. Joel Kinnaman. He plays the Eric Heller character, and it's so funny because he does this whole thing where he buys lard from the local Finnish meat shop, and he lards himself up for the swim. So it's a little more realistic. It's like because you die of hypothermia otherwise. And he puts his passports and his suit and everything in this sealed bag and puts it on his back, and he swims across. But that's an aside. Anyway, so the real world shows up for Eric by swimming to Germany, but Hanna has to endure the interrogation because she gets herself captured on purpose, and she thinks she's speaking to Viegler. But in fact, it's a fake Viegler being played by Michelle Dockery in this thankless role. Like, how did you get Michelle Dockery to show up to just get her head, get her neck snapped?
Mary from Downton Abbey? Is that who that is?
Yeah. And so, but my favorite part of this moment, what I think is so important, is when Hanna, tricks fake Viegler into an embrace. And they say, oh, we got to get drugs to bring her down. And she hears the door open. She immediately snaps his neck. And she just, like, Hanna goes ham on the whole house and starts shooting everybody and shooting all the cameras. It's one of the best moments in the film. And the best part about it is Cate Blanchett's expression as Viegler in awe of / like terror. And it's just remarkable. And she's like, holy shit, what is this thing that has just been unleashed on the world?
Yeah. And I mean, I love that scene where she goes crazy. She shoots the cameras. And, she goes through it. And then Tommy, who was watching it with me, because Antonella and Tommy watched this with me, Tommy's like, all right, so Dad, they have all these cameras in the room, but they don't have cameras all around this big space where they could see where she is. I'm like, Tommy, it's a movie.
Yeah.
So he was immediately like, all right, Dad. He's like that. All right, Dad, listen. And so he's always trying to figure out the other one he talks about. I'll talk about it later. So, he was doing that, but I love when she escapes.
Yeah.
And she comes out and she's in basically this rock-filled desert. It's a beautiful shot. It's beautiful scene.
It's like she literally enters another world.
Yeah, it's great. I love that. That was really well done.
And she immediately encounters the real world by running into Sophie, who is the daughter of the nuclear English family, which we're going to talk about a little bit, because they're the proxy for normalcy in this film, of a normal family. And Sophie is your typical, she just like sees her and just like, hello. And Hannah's just like, oh God, another human being that's not trying to kill me. What do I do? And so what does Hanna do? She immediately spits out her whole cover story in a single sentence, which is really, really awkward. And Sophie's like, basically like, whatever. and just talking about her pop-up culture obsessions. Like, did you know MIA doesn't know English? And it's like, and if you don't know English, that's okay, because she learned it when she was 8 and she's from Sri Lanka. Are you from Sri Lanka? And so Hannah's like, no, I am from Germany. And you know,
Exactly. And my friends are, and my dog's name is
Trudy.
Trudy. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so, but this is important because this is her first introduction to civilization, and she initially avoids Sophie and her family, and we meet Miles, her little brother, and we see in the distance that her family is on some sort of like, road trip, camping, vacation with their camper van. And she avoids them initially, and then she goes to this Moroccan town, and she holes up in this basement with this gentleman who's a hotelier and is amazed that she can speak Arabic.
Yeah.
And but she gets overloaded too. Like she's not ready for she's like, whoa, electricity,
Totally.
And there's, the kettle and the TV, and there's this moment of sensory overload, and she's trying to make things go off, and then so she escapes, and this leads to her running into Sophie again.
Yeah, and I mean, I really like the Sophie character because the
Uh-huh.
way the Sophie character talks and the way in which they interact, and even the younger brother, um, you know, you her her alienness becomes that much more accentuated,
Yeah.
by this girl so caught up in, the idea of her being different from her hippie mom and caring about how she looks and caring about like all these. And obviously she's at a moment in her life where she's exploring like you know boys and
Yeah.
sex and all that, and so it's a great character to find Hannah alongside, and to work through as they kind of you know come together. So this is the point where basically Hannah you know hitchhikes on them or stows away in their Winnebago as
Yeah.
they're going from Morocco to Spain. And I
Right.
really like that movement they do on the ferry, and then they go up to Cordoba and Andalusia, and then they keep on going north. But like it's a kind of nice visual of Europe, from North Africa to Europe. I really like that part.
Yeah.
But then you introduce these crazy Nazi kind of like, I don't know what to do,
Henchman, yeah. With
henchmen
Isaacs,
who
yeah.
who
Yeah,
look
yeah, yeah.
like punk skinhead punks
Yeah, yeah,
from the
yeah.
80s with their
Yeah.
whole outfit.
I
And then
know.
the other one looks like the Pet Shop Boys, right? With
Yeah.
his blonde hair and the
Yeah, yeah,
yellow
yeah, yeah.
jumpsuit.
That's
I
Tom
was like,
Hollander playing the Isaacs character, who's kind of like the Marissa Viegler, like, I am more, menacing than you are, for proxy for violence. But it's so funny. It's like Tom Hollander. I know. Oh wait, he was the British Prime Minister in one of the Mission Impossible films, and he was really really funny. So he is, from my perspective of like, that was my first perspective of Tom Hollander. To him to be playing this kind of assassin style, like, spook, it doesn't seem right. So I actually like how his casting is counter to what you would expect to who would be cast as like the uber um ruthless assassin type who's chasing down Hannah on the request of Marissa Viegler. But back to, as you're describing the Sophie character, and you know Hannah finds her again once they've made the crossing into Spain, and Sophie is like a typical teenage girl, and Hannah doesn't know what to do with this because she's not prepared. She's like, hey, do you want to just stay with us? And she's like, wait, what? And it's like, yeah, oh, and there's these boys behind us, and like, let's just
yeah,
go out. And she takes her out on her like a double date, and she just doesn't know what to do this. And the production design has Hannah's character wearing a mask on her forehead, like to kind of quasi bring out her mythical like nature. And I think in my mind, I think it's a little ham-fisted, but whatever. But I love how she tries to navigate, a date, and she allows this boy to kiss her, but then she just basically jujitsus him to the ground. And Sophie's just like, dude, what are you doing? Like, he's just a boy.
yeah, that's wild. And it's also interesting because obviously part of what from what the production notes said that you wrote up, I guess one of the struggles Lockheed was doing with like, what do you do with the sexuality of someone who is just coming of age but has lived in the forest their whole
Yeah.
life. And
Mhm.
there's this kind of other character. And I think that was done well because, after this scene, Sophie and Hanna go back to the tent or to the, Winnebago, and they're hanging out. And then they have a moment, and
Yeah.
it's a kind of affectionate moment. It's not like, a love scene per se, but
No.
there's this sense where, Hanna, it's very fluid for her, right? Like that whole relationship between people. And there's not the same notion of, chasing the boy or the girl, or who do I like or who do I don't like, right? There's like people, and
Yeah.
there's this just
And they're
sense
either
that she's
trying to
connected
kill
to
you
a
or not
person.
trying to kill you.
Exactly.
And she's like,
Exactly.
and that's the whole idea. That's one of the big themes of this film. It's like Hannah is discovering, wait, the people that are not trying to kill you, what do you do with them? Right.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a
And
good
in
point.
this moment with Sophie, she's teaching her what it means to be a friend, right? And friends have to be truthful with one another. Friends have to tell stories that are about not the ones that are your cover story, but the real truth of what you're doing. And and Hannah's like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, I don't know if I can do that. And she does try to coax her out of her feral self into being a real human being.
She does, but at the same time, she's being hunted by Isaacs and his henchmen.
Yeah.
And at the point where, there's a moment between the mom, the hippie mom, who's played by I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
Olivia Williams, who was in
Yeah.
Rushmore,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
I
she's
really
great.
remember from
Yeah,
Rushmore, and she was
that's right.
great.
Oh,
So
thank you. I forgot about
yeah.
that, yeah.
And so she plays the mom, and she has the kind of, they have this connection, and she's trying to kind of, as she's driving, read the map. And she's looking through the rearview mirror, and she knows that they're being followed.
Right.
And they pull over, and the worst happens. Hanna goes out and faces the henchmen and Isaacs. But the family, in particular Sophie, follows her and sees her amongst all these containers, kicking some serious ass. But not only that, slicing the throat of one of these skinheads. And essentially, she, at that point, kind of like, is essentially no longer, you don't get the sense that she has that same, friendship like vibe anymore. It's
Mhm.
become a little
Wait,
bit like,
why?
who are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, like
And this
very
one is
different, right?
and this one is where the TV series I actually really adored the difference. So, one of the things to get into the family that's interesting is like this family is presented as this prototypical perfect nuclear family of four. We got the mother and the father and the daughter and the son, and they're on this lovely road trip camping, and they're through Morocco and southern Spain, and they're singing together in the car, and it's like, oh, very Von Trapp like, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, how wonderful this is. But there's these little bits that reveal some of the fraying, and I really appreciate that this found its way into the writing of this story. Is there's this moment where Rachel's like waxing poetic about her like hippiness. It's like, oh, I feel so connected to the countryside, or it's in the earlier scene, and her husband calls her out like, oh yes, like your travels through Greece from bed to bed to bed, like you weren't like so into like the being part of the world and the sights, you were in the nature, you just were finding man after man that you fell in love with at that time. And then at the same time she just you know snipes right back at him and calling him basically a conservative, right? It's like, oh, you chill out, right? Like, who are you? And so that's really good. And in the TV series, it's really great because it's this um, relationship between an Indian, it's still a British family, and it's an Indian man and this white woman, and they clearly are having real stress in their relationship, and it's fleshed out a
Yeah.
lot more. And and Hannah's connection to that family goes deeper and all the way back to England, and it allows her to explore teenagerdom through the Sophie character as a proxy through meeting schoolboys back in England, and there's a lot of nice things about that are a lot of fun for I imagine as a writer to play with and flesh out her disconnectedness from society, and Sophie's trying to bring her into the world of what it's like to just be a regular teenage girl.
And it's interesting too because I haven't seen the TV series, But I am glad to know that the British family did not die a brutal death
Oh,
at the hand of Isaacs and the henchmen, because I don't know, but that's pretty much what I assumed,
yeah, in
because
the film,
how
yeah.
brutal everything was in the film,
Everybody
in
is.
particular, Kate Blanchett's character. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it just shoot you in the head, shoot you in the head. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'll shoot you in the head. Did you get shot in the head? Can I shoot you? Let me shoot you in the head. Like, and so I was like, now that you're saying the British family lived and Hannah has a kind of second act with them,
Yeah.
that I feel a little better right now.
Oh, you should. Yeah, yeah. And so, it's great because now we're kind of wending towards the Marissa Viegler character. And, in some of the production notes based on my research, like she was kind of labeled as the evil stepmother in the fairy tale. And there are things about that are great, because we talked about how, like, Kate Blanchett as Marissa's terrifying response to seeing Hannah during the interrogation to go ham and kill everybody. But we later learn, when she first meets Isaacs to kind of contract him to hunt down Hannah, he knows who she is, right? In this CIA program to kind of build super soldier girls, which is explored in the TV series to middling ends. Because he says to Marissa, it's like, did she turn out as you'd hoped? And her response is, with tremendous pride, better, and it's this idea. So now we're starting to realize, wait, Marissa Viegler is a proxy of a mother here, like a distant parent who'd been raising Hanna, and she's like, oh, I'm so proud of what you've become, honey. You're like a super assassin, just ruthless, as ruthless as me.
That's the best neck breaking I've seen in a long time. You're so good.
You're so good. And Viegler's character, and I really like to think about, like, how actors and actresses must explore these ideas, and what's the inner narrative that Kate Blanchett built to flesh out how she's going to perform the Viegler character. And there's these scenes where Viegler's chasing down Eric while Isaacs is chasing down Hannah, and one of Viegler's first stops is at Hannah's mother's house. So it's like Hannah's grandmother's place. So this is Johanna is Hannah's real mother,
Yeah.
Who's introduced in a flashback, which we'll get to later. And her grandmother is living in Germany, and she has this massive collection of tapes that Johanna had sent to her while she was part of this CIA program that was helping her. She was kind of, apparently we learn later that she was going to get an abortion, and Eric had recruited her into the program. And she feels good about this program. It's going to help her be a better mother, and she's really excited. And but it's Viegler who's listening to these tapes now, and you get a sense that Viegler's like taking in her story and trying to make it her own. Like, I am the real mother, right? Not you. And she's expressing this through her response to the grandmother, who says, like, have you ever had children? And her response is so harsh. It's like, I had to make choices.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's a whole place you could go there with, like, the
Mhm.
modern predicament of a woman right now, and like where that goes between family and career. And
Yeah.
obviously, she is
Between
a high
family
powered.
and shooting people and running illegal CIA
Yeah.
programs.
Well, and that the illegal CIA program is interesting too, because that's the one where you start to see that these women were going to have an abortion, but instead, they were kind of roped into doing these tests on the children, and then they were DNA tests, I guess. So that's the whole add-on narrative. But that works really well with some of the conspiracy narratives of King in the 80s, at least with Firestarter, and
Yeah.
then again with Stranger Things.
Yeah, with 11, yeah.
So I like that, obviously, in that
Yeah.
whole labs with Matthew Modine. But the figure that's interesting is, and it never is fully explained, and that's kind of what I like about it. Maybe that's a result of it being an add-on, is you have the mother, the real mother, the biological mother of Hannah.
Yeah,
Johanna, and you have Hannah as a young baby, and Eric Bana's character, driving away. And so you have this flashback scene,
Mm-hmm.
which is happening right around this time, when the Viegler character is basically finally telling you a little bit about like what happened, how did we get here, and you start to realize that they were, Eric Bana must have basically said like, I felt maybe he fell in love with her.
Yep.
Maybe there was some, relationship. It's kind of gray, which I like. And they're running away from her, and she's basically haunting them as she does throughout the film. But that character who plays the mother is Vicky Crepes, or I don't know her name, who's in The Phantom Thread, and is in a lot of. She's kind of right after this movie kind of blows up as an actress. And I
Okay.
recognized her and I was like, oh, that's her. And Antonella confirmed it. So it was interesting to see her in it. And that's another idea is this a European film? Because they
Yeah.
have these
Mm-hmm.
European actresses in it like her who kind of, validate some of that kind of, is this European? It seems kind of European, just like the character who plays Hannah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think this Johanna character, there's this idea of Viegler listening to her, and there's this really great scene after she kills, like, so Viegler ends up killing the grandmother, as she's staring at her daughter and saying, you'll never understand. And she shoots her in the back of the head right through into her daughter's photograph, um, which is really brutal. But the idea is like she continues. We get her obsession with this notion of being the stepmother, and in a sense that she's back in the hotel room, still pursuing Eric. Right, because her job is to pursue Eric still, and she's brushing her teeth, and they show all these like dental instruments to show like she's ready to replay the "Is It Safe" scene from Running Man, not Running Man, from
The
Marathon
Marathon
Man,
Man.
yeah.
Yeah.
and she's listening to Hannah talk about her pregnancy and what it feels like to be pregnant, and it's like she's really trying to inhabit this idea of being a mother, and it becomes her undoing. And we're kind of in a weird way, kind of in plot wise, getting towards the end of this, because there's not really a ton of
There's
plot
not
to this
much.
whole.
No.
No, it's basically a 3-day chase scene, right?
Yeah,
For the
totally.
most part. And because we have Hannah has gotten away from Isaacs and the henchmen and is making her way to Germany. Eric has already made his way to Germany, and they come to this place where they come together, which is this really fantastical. This is where the fairy tale comes to life, I guess, is they create this weird kind of decrepit amusement park that had these grim fairy tale themes. And there's like big plastic dinosaurs and wolves that are kind of falling apart and are part of tunnels. Like it's like a kid's train would go into the mouth of a wolf, like the Red Riding Hood scene or something like that.
Yeah, and I kind of, when I saw the mushroom house and the guy in the mushroom house,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is a little overdone. Like the setting is a little too like in your face, right?
Uh-huh.
But I really did like the wolf's mouth and the train. Like I
Yeah.
love the wolf just the way it looked. But the kind of the Alice in Wonderland fairy tale mushroom house and the guy who was dancing around and saying,
Yeah.
listen to music. Have you listened to music and all
Yeah.
that?
And
Like
he's like, is he Mr. Grimm? He's just a
yeah,
friend of Eric Heller's. And he says he has known Hannah's mother, and Hannah is very endeared by him because he's like, immediately mothering her and like making her breakfast and
yeah.
inviting her to stay. And it's one of these very brief moments of calm that she gets to, oh, here's another person not trying to kill me, and I get to make a connection with them.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting, and I think it's one of the struggles of this film is to balance the tone between that really like wicked violence that kind
Yeah.
of,
Hmm.
pervades, especially with the Viegler character, and then, this kind of sense of lightness, because you can never enjoy the lightness because you know what's coming, and
Right.
like, and so the tone of the movie, even when you want to laugh, or if it's kind of funny, and it is funny at times, particularly with the British family and the British daughter and the son, they're kind of characters, but it's very hard to ever feel like the sense that you can take a breath and and relax a little bit, or like, you know, take your shoes off. It's one of those movies where you're always like, all right,
I mean, it's so funny because I was just listening to one of my favorite podcasts about films, and they were talking about Jeremiah Johnson, the film, for, you know, in honor of Robert Redford. They're doing a bunch of Robert Redford films, and one of the things that came up was this idea of how in that film it's a man who's kind of left behind war, and it's of the 70s, so it's not like, unlike Vietnam, trying to leave behind the war but still wearing your fatigues as Vietnam vets often did. He still wears his Spanish American War uniform as he slowly becomes a mountain man. And there's this same thing where he's just struggling in nature. His real world is struggling in nature, man against the wild and the, you know, Native American Crow community that he's trying to live amongst. And he makes this connection to, he makes peace with the crows, and they allow him to hunt and live. And he even has this domestic life that he builds with woman and boy, which is the name of the characters in the film. And but what happens is that he, you know, Jeremiah Johnson is forced to try to help these Americans try to save these settlers, and he goes through sacred territory of the Crow Nation. And, you know, this leads to the Crows murdering his wife and his wife and child, right? And this leads to him going on a murder spree, right, of the Crows to get revenge. But that revenge plot is based on real life of this man who was known as Liver Eating Johnson. But the idea is like, it is more of a myth, and that's the connection I'm making here. It's like, it was this myth of a man who killed 300 crows in revenge for, you know, experiencing his life out there. And obviously that's probably not true. And that's what it's kind of interesting if Hanna had just been a myth in the vein of Jeremiah Johnson, and rather than having to have this real explanation behind it. And I was like, making that connection is like, oh, that would have been really cool if it was much simpler, and that, like, you're just this is your experience, your life experience, and it's really not typical. And in our sense, it's about family, and then how you just have to escape that or live through that and not escape it, and just like nod your head and become a meme of like, yes, this is true, because that's what Jeremiah Johnson becomes. It's the man with the beard, and that people know that movie simply from the meme.
Yeah, exactly.
The
where he turns and looks, right?
Yeah. So you go ahead.
I just wanted to make a quick personal connection to this movie, because, you know, part of what really resonated with me is I also killed many like security figures and military figures and CIA figures as I was growing up. So I could really relate to this.
On your skateboard?
Yeah, on my skateboard, you know, and I would just steal their guns from them and then karate chop them and shoot them. And so I was like, to see it on the movie, like, kind of spoke to me in my growing up.
Oh, thank God. I never would have guessed. So, I mean, ultimately, you know, I think the undoing, we have two.
I hope my kids have the same experience.
I hope so too. So there's two reconciliations of family to happen towards the end of this film. And the first one is Hanna confronting Eric, because there's this moment where, you know, Hanna is hiding from Marissa in the mushroom house, and she hears Marissa talking to Isaacs about the interrogation of the magician, Mr. Grimm, and they've murdered him, but it doesn't matter. And they're laughing about how they think that Eric's really Hannah's father, and they're going, ha, 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 you know, and Hanna realizes, wait, Eric's not my dad. And so there's some Fort plot machinations of, they're going to the grandmother's house, and then they're back at the mushroom house. And it's at the grandmother's house that Eric and Hanna have this confrontation. And she's basically saying, you're not my dad. What? You're not my dad. And he spells out the whole CIA plot. It's like, no, I recruited your mom. And and I got her to join this CIA embryo genetic modification program, and that's you, yay!
Yeah, and it makes you question his character. You're like,
Right.
what? Like, what were you involved in?
Yeah, but the whole point is he's rejecting it. And the TV series delves deeply through Joel Kinnaman, who I think plays this role really well, of his quandary of being like a low level, hired local operative, not a real CIA agent, um, to make money by like getting these practical girls to give up their children for adoption. And so he rejects that adoption. And so the escape is really they're stealing the baby back from the program, and who's one of many, 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 many girls that have been embryo modified and are now, basically adopted by the CIA and to be turned into super soldiers. And so Johanna and Eric basically go and steal her daughter back, and they're going to become a family and go live and try to be in the world. But Marissa Viegler gets in the way of that idea. And so, but sadly, Hanna this is where the name of this episode comes from. It's like Eric's talking about, like, I loved you because you were my child. I raised you. And that's like this idea of fatherhood based on the father you have, not the father that, birthed you or who created you, because men don't birth children.
Is that right?
And he says, I tried to prepare you for what life would be. And Hannah's response is simply, you didn't prepare me for this. But the funny thing is, like, he did. I mean, it's like his fault that she turned into a genetically modified Supergirl. But in reality, he prepared her for one aspect of life, is that she's going to be pursued forever by the CIA. They're going to always be trying to murder you because they know you exist, that you're their weapon. You're their property. But at the same time, she wasn't prepared to be ready for the non-killers of the world and how to socialize.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's hard. I mean, Hannah's between a rock and a hard place. And I think, I don't know how the series, but like, does the series just continue with her always being hunted even after
No,
her?
so I mean, in the series, so there's there's the final confrontation with Marissa Viegler, which her undoing is she really like kind of gets emotional when she finally meets Hanna. It's like, oh, it's my daughter. Look what I've created. And she tries to manipulate her. And bottom line, it's like Hannah's of course going to win this battle, and she ends up killing Marissa Viegler. But in the series, the Viegler character is played by Muriel Enos, who's really great and a real redhead, unlike Kate Blanchett, and she is not killed by Hanna, and she becomes and eventually the Eric Heller character does die, and Marissa does take on the role of trying to be her caretaker and guide. As Hanna, the real story becomes about these girls and these young women who are part of this bigger program, and it becomes this like bigger CIA Supergirl like assassin program, and she gets involved with it, and she makes friends with all these girls, and some of the girls it becomes about them wanting to explore finding there's one character who wants to find her actual mother. She realizes, like, I have a real mother. I want my real mother. I want to meet her. I want to be with her. Fuck all this like assassin bullshit. And so Hanna, her mission becomes saving these girls in her mind. And Marissa, who has been tricked by the CIA and told that like that program was destroyed and she helped destroy it, still there was another, it's kind of like the Jason Bourne thing, right? There's Treadstone, there's what are the other ones, like, there's multiple iterations of this same program going on, and Viegler is trying for that story to reconcile her misdeeds by trying to help Hanna rescue these girls from their fate of being, puppets of the CIA. So, I mean, there's things about that series I love. I mean, it's just popcorn thriller, spy stuff. And I loved it. And because it's in Hannah's character, I still have always liked. And that's what attracted me. It's a funky on the run family because they're not on the run trying to maintain normalcy, which I think is something we're going to be exploring a bit more in these other episodes. But in this one, it's a family that's trying to go towards normalcy after being kind of sequestered from the world because of this super program. So
No, actually, it is definitely a family on the run. It reminds me of that, like, Fantastic. You ever see that Captain Fantastic movie?
No, no. Well, is that worth
That might be a
exploring?
good one to watch, actually, in relationship to this. Anyway, Hanna is bananas.
Bye, everybody.